Your grandparents didn't have a refrigerator for half their lives. Think about that for a moment. For the first 40, 50, sometimes 60 years of their lives, there was no electric fridge humming in the kitchen, no freezer full of vacuum-sealed packages, no cold chain from slaughterhouse to supermarket to your table. And yet they ate meat. They fed their families. They survived winters. They got through lean months and harvest gluts alike. They didn't starve. They didn't get sick every time they ate a pork chop. They knew something we've largely forgotten, something the food industry has spent decades making sure you'd never need to remember. The Amish still know it. Go to an Amish community in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, anywhere those communities thrive, and you'll find cellars full of preserved meat, smokehouses out back, crocks of salted pork that have been sitting since autumn and will last well past spring. These folks don't run extension cords to their smokehouses. They don't plug anything in. They use methods that are older than the United States itself, methods that kept armies fed on long campaigns, methods that stocked sailing ships for voyages that lasted months at sea, methods that are so effective, so time-tested, and so dirt cheap that the modern meat processing industry would rather you never gave them a second thought. Because here's the ugly truth. If you knew how to preserve your own meat, how to take a whole hog or a side of beef and make it last for years without any electricity at all, you wouldn't need to buy as much from them. You wouldn't need to pay for all that packaging. You wouldn't need to panic every time the power goes out and your freezer starts thawing. You wouldn't be dependent. And dependency is exactly what the modern food system is built on. They want you buying meat 2 or 3 times a week. They want you convinced that fresh from the grocery store is the only safe meat. They want you afraid of anything that doesn't come in a sealed foam tray with a sell-by date stamped on it. Well, I'm here to tell you that fear is manufactured. The methods I'm going to share with you today are real. They work. They've been working for thousands of years, and almost all of them cost less than $1 to get started. My name is Sue Ellen. I grew up in rural Tennessee, and I was lucky enough to be raised by a grandmother who still did things the old way. Mama Dottie had a smokehouse on her property right up until the day she passed. She cured her own bacon. She made her own salt pork. She kept a crock of lard rendered from the hogs they raised every year. And she taught me everything she knew because she said someone had to carry it forward. I've spent most of my adult life studying traditional food preservation, not just the Southern and Appalachian traditions I grew up with, but the Amish and Mennonite methods, the old European charcuterie traditions, the techniques used in Scandinavian fishing communities, the methods passed down through farmsteads in every culture that ever had to survive a winter without modern technology. I teach these methods to folks who want to get out from under the food system, who want real food security, who want to stop wasting money and start building a pantry that could last for years. If this is your kind of thing, I want you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is all about practical, old-fashioned food knowledge that still works in the modern world. And when you're done watching this video, leave me a comment down below and tell me what kind of meat you're most interested in preserving. Pork, beef, venison, fish? I read every single comment, and your answers help me decide what to cover next. Now let's talk about the method. The single most important, most ancient, most reliable method of meat preservation that humanity has ever discovered is salt curing, also called dry curing. It's what the Amish use. It's what your great-great-grandparents used. It's what every civilization that ever existed before refrigeration used. And it works because of a simple principle of chemistry that bacteria cannot overcome. Salt draws moisture out of meat through a process called osmosis. When you pack meat in salt or rub it thoroughly with a salt mixture, the salt pulls water out of the muscle cells and out of the surface of the meat. It creates what scientists call a low water activity environment. And bacteria, the kind that cause spoilage and foodborne illness, need water to survive. Without available water, they cannot reproduce. They cannot colonize the meat. They simply cannot grow. You've essentially created a hostile environment where spoilage organisms have no foothold. This isn't theory. This is well-established food science, and it's the same principle behind every cured meat you've ever eaten. Prosciutto, country ham, pancetta, salt cod, corned beef. Every single one of these foods is preserved through the action of salt. Here's how to do it at home, the way the Amish do it, the way my grandmother did it, the way people have done it for thousands of years. You start with good salt, not iodized table salt. That can leave a bitter flavor and interfere with the curing process. You want plain kosher salt or canning salt, non-iodized, no additives, nothing fancy. It costs about $1 a pound at any grocery store, and a pound of salt can cure a significant amount of meat. For a basic dry cure, you're going to use salt at roughly 1 ounce per pound of meat as a minimum. Many traditional recipes go higher, especially for long-term preservation, up to 1.5 ounces per pound. The Amish and old-time country ham makers often used even more for hams they planned to age for a year or longer. For pork, which is what most traditional preservation focused on, you rub the entire surface of the meat thoroughly with your salt cure. Every inch, every crevice. Don't be shy about it. Then you pack the meat in a container, traditionally a wooden barrel or a ceramic crock, with more salt packed around and between pieces. The meat goes into a cool place, a cellar, a cold room, somewhere that stays between 35 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Too warm and things move too fast. Too cold and the curing process slows down too much. For smaller cuts, pork belly for bacon, pork shoulder for salt pork, you're looking at about a week to 10 days of curing time. For a whole ham, a full hind leg of pork, the traditional rule is 1 day per 2 pounds of meat, minimum. So a 15-pound ham needs at least 7 to 8 days in the cure. Many old-timers went much longer, a month or more. The longer it cures, the saltier and drier it becomes, and the longer it will last. During the curing process, you need to turn the meat every day or two. The liquid that draws out, called the brine or the drippage, needs to be drained off. This moisture is exactly what you're trying to remove. Don't let the meat sit in it. Once the meat has finished its initial cure, many traditional recipes call for a secondary step, a sugar or spice rub. Brown sugar or molasses is common in American country ham traditions. This doesn't just add flavor. The sugar helps balance the saltiness, and in combination with the salt, it helps develop that beautiful deep color on the outside of the meat. The Amish often add black pepper, red pepper, and sometimes sage or thyme to their cure mixture. These herbs have some antimicrobial properties of their own, and they add complexity to the final flavor that you just cannot get from any commercial product. After the dry cure is complete, you have what's called green cure meat. It's preserved, but it hasn't been dried or smoked yet. At this stage, properly cured pork can be kept in a cold environment for weeks, but if you want it to last for months or years, you're going to want to apply one of 2 additional preservation steps, smoking or air drying. And I'd argue that smoking is the most important one, so let's talk about that next. Smoking meat is one of those things that sounds complicated, but is actually remarkably straightforward once you understand what's happening. There are 2 kinds of smoking that matter for preservation, and they are very different in their effects. Hot smoking, which most people are familiar with from backyard barbecue, cooks the meat at temperatures between 165 and 250 degrees Fahrenheit while exposing it to smoke. Hot smoked meat is delicious, but it's not the kind of smoking we're talking about for long-term preservation. Hot smoked meat still has a lot of moisture in it, and it needs to be refrigerated or eaten within a few days, just like cooked meat. Cold smoking is completely different. Cold smoking exposes the meat to smoke at temperatures below 90 degrees Fahrenheit, often between 60 and 80 degrees. The meat doesn't cook. The smoke doesn't raise the internal temperature enough to kill anything outright. What it does instead is deposit hundreds of chemical compounds onto the surface and into the outer layers of the meat. Compounds like phenols and aldehydes and organic acids, compounds that have powerful antimicrobial and antioxidant properties. Phenols in particular are what give smoked meat its distinctive flavor. But more importantly for preservation, they create a surface environment that bacteria and mold find inhospitable. They slow the oxidation of fats, which prevents rancidity. They form a kind of chemical barrier on the outside of the meat that protects what's inside. Combined with a good salt cure, cold smoking creates a preservation effect that is genuinely remarkable. A salt-cured, cold-smoked ham can be hung in a cool, dry place and last for a year or more without any refrigeration at all. This is exactly what Amish families have been doing for generations. A smokehouse is a simple structure: 4 walls, a roof, a way to hang the meat, and a controlled smolder going at the bottom. Nothing electrical, nothing fancy. The best woods for cold smoking are hardwoods. Hickory is the traditional American choice, and it's what my grandmother always used. It gives a strong, rich smoke with good preservation properties. Applewood is milder and sweeter, good for poultry and pork. Cherrywood gives a slightly sweet smoke and a beautiful reddish color. Oak is excellent for beef. Alder is the traditional choice for fish, especially salmon. What you want to avoid are softwoods: pine, cedar, spruce, fir. These contain resins that create creosote and other unpleasant, potentially harmful compounds when burned. Stick to hardwoods and you're fine. For cold smoking a cured ham or a side of bacon, you want the meat cold when you start, fresh out of the curing chamber. You hang it or set it on racks in your smokehouse or cold smoker. The temperature needs to stay below 90 degrees Fahrenheit. If the temperature climbs higher, you're hot smoking instead of cold smoking, and the preservation dynamics change. You want a smolder, not a fire. Dense smoke at low heat. Cold smoking times vary by meat and by how intense a smoke flavor you want. For bacon, the Amish tradition often calls for anywhere from 1 to 3 days of cold smoking, 8 to 12 hours a day, then resting overnight. For whole hams, some traditional pures involve smoking over multiple weeks, though usually not continuously. The meat absorbs smoke gradually over time. After smoking, the meat can be hung to air dry and age. This further reduces water activity. A whole country ham hanging in a cool, dry cellar or smokehouse will continue to lose moisture over weeks and months, becoming denser, more concentrated in flavor, and more shelf-stable. Some of the most prized traditional hams in America and Europe are aged for a year, 2 years, even longer. I want to take a moment here to talk about the setup you need for cold smoking, because I know a lot of folks assume you need an expensive rig. You don't. The traditional Amish smokehouse is nothing more than a small wooden structure, could be as small as 4 feet by 4 feet, with a dirt floor, hooks or wooden dowels near the top for hanging meat, and a metal pan or a small firebox at the bottom where you maintain a slow, cool smolder. You keep the fire small enough that the heat doesn't build up. You vent the top to let the smoke flow through. That's it. You can build one of these for under $50 in materials, or you can adapt a metal garbage can, a wooden barrel, or even a cardboard box for short-term cold smoking. The principles are the same regardless of the vessel. What matters is keeping the temperature below 90 degrees, keeping the smoke dense and consistent, and starting with properly cured meat. Get those 3 things right, and you're doing exactly what generations of Amish farmers have done. Now I want to talk about another preservation method that doesn't get nearly enough attention, and that's fermentation. When most people hear fermented meat, they think of something exotic or foreign. But you've eaten fermented meat your whole life if you've ever had salami, pepperoni, summer sausage, or hard chorizo. All of those products are preserved through fermentation. Here's how it works. When you grind meat and mix it with salt and specific spices, particularly those containing natural sugars, and pack it tightly to exclude oxygen, you create conditions where beneficial bacteria, primarily lactobacillus species, can thrive. These bacteria produce lactic acid as a byproduct of their metabolism. The acid lowers the pH of the meat, and at low pH, the harmful bacteria that cause spoilage and foodborne illness, Salmonella, Listeria, the really dangerous ones, cannot survive. The acidic environment kills them or prevents them from reproducing. This is the same basic principle behind sauerkraut and pickles and yogurt. You're using beneficial organisms to outcompete the harmful ones, and the end result is a meat product that is shelf-stable without refrigeration. Making fermented sausages at home is more involved than dry curing a ham, but it's not as complicated as it might seem. You need ground pork or beef, or a combination. You need salt at about 2 to 3% of the total weight of the meat. You need spices. The classics are garlic, black pepper, red pepper, and fennel for an Italian-style product. You need time and patience, a cool space, and a way to pack the sausage tightly into casings. The fermentation happens over days to weeks at temperatures between 55 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. As the pH drops, you'll notice the sausage firming up and developing that characteristic tangy, rich smell of cured meat. After fermentation, the sausage is dried, hung in a cool, airy space, until it loses roughly 30 to 40% of its starting weight. At that point, you have something close to a traditional salami or hard sausage that will keep for months without refrigeration. If you want to get into fermented sausages at home, I'd suggest starting with a simple recipe, a basic salami-style pork sausage with garlic and black pepper. Keep it simple your first time. Get comfortable with the process. Learn what the meat is supposed to look, feel, and smell like at each stage. Then you can start experimenting with different spice combinations, different cuts of meat, and different fermentation times. The investment in equipment is minimal. You need a meat grinder, which you can get for $20 or $30 at any discount store. You need natural casings, which you can order online for just a few dollars. You need a cool spot to hang the finished sausages. A basement, a cool garage, a spare room in winter. That's it. The rest is just meat and salt and time. Now let me take a moment to talk about the science behind all of this, because understanding why it works will help you do it better and help you feel confident in what you're doing. The key concept in meat preservation is water activity, often abbreviated as AW. Water activity is a measure of how much of the water in a food is available for chemical reactions, including the biological reactions that bacteria and mold need to carry out in order to grow. Pure water has a water activity of 1.0. Most fresh meat has a water activity above 0.98. Most bacteria that cause foodborne illness cannot grow below a water activity of about 0.91. And many harmful organisms need water activity above 0.95. When you add salt to meat, the salt molecules bind to water molecules. They hold onto the water tightly. The water is still there. The total moisture content might not change dramatically, but the water is no longer free. It's bound up with the salt. So the available water, the water activity, drops. When salt concentrations are high enough, water activity drops below the threshold where harmful bacteria can survive. Smoke adds another layer. The phenolic compounds in wood smoke not only create an inhospitable surface for bacteria, they also slow the oxidation of fats. Rancidity, which is the breakdown of fats by oxygen, is what causes that off smell and taste in old meat. Smoke compounds are antioxidants. They donate electrons to unstable free radicals, stopping the chain reaction of fat oxidation. So smoked meat stays fresh tasting for longer, not just because bacteria can't grow on it, but because the fats don't go rancid. Drying, The reduction of total moisture through air curing takes things even further. As water evaporates from the surface of the meat, total moisture content drops. Even with salt already binding much of the water, additional drying brings water activity down even lower. A well-cured, cold-smoked, air-dried ham can have a water activity low enough that virtually nothing can grow on it. And at the pH levels created by fermentation, that protection is doubled. This is not folk magic. This is chemistry. Old methods grounded in real science. And now that food science has given us the framework to understand why they work, we can apply them with even more confidence and precision than our grandparents could. Now I need to talk about safety because I care about you, and I want you doing this right. These methods work, but they require attention and knowledge. Let me tell you what to watch for. First, temperature during curing is critical. The curing process works best and most safely between 35 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Too warm, above 50 degrees for extended periods, and bacteria can multiply faster than the salt can do its work. A traditional cold cellar or a spare refrigerator works perfectly. A garage in winter works in colder climates. Use a thermometer. Don't guess. Second, use enough salt. Insufficient salt is the primary cause of failure in home curing. If a recipe calls for a specific amount, don't reduce it to make the end product less salty. You can rinse or soak the finished product before cooking to reduce saltiness, but you cannot add more preservation after the fact. Use the full amount of salt specified in your recipe. Third, know what properly cured meat looks and smells like. Good cured meat smells savory, salty, slightly funky in the way that good aged cheese smells funky, complex and rich, not rotten. The surface of properly cured meat is dry and firm. It may develop a white or slightly bluish-gray mold on the exterior during air curing, and this is normal. It's the same family of benign molds that grows on good salami and prosciutto. You can wipe this off with a cloth dipped in white vinegar without any concern. What you don't want to see: black or green mold penetrating beneath the surface, soft, slimy spots, a sharp ammoniac or putrid smell. Any of these signs mean something went wrong and the meat should be discarded. Don't taste test anything that has a genuinely foul smell. Trust your nose. It's been evolved over millions of years to detect spoilage, and it's pretty good at its job. If you're curing a whole muscle cut like a ham or a pork belly, you can probe the thickest part with a clean skewer and smell it. The interior should smell like cured meat, not like fresh raw meat or anything sour or off. This is called the bone taint test, and old-time curers have used it for centuries to verify that a whole ham is cured properly all the way through. Finally, know your starting material. Curing is not a way to salvage meat that's already going bad. You start with fresh, high-quality meat. You start with clean equipment. You keep your hands clean. Old methods don't mean sloppy methods. Your grandmother wasn't careless in her smokehouse, and neither should you be. One more thing I want to address before we wrap up. The question I hear most often from people just getting into traditional preservation, and that question is this really as safe as refrigeration? The answer is yes, when done correctly. These methods have fed human populations for thousands of years. They are used today in many parts of the world where refrigeration is not universal. Traditional cured meats like prosciutto di Parma, Iberian ham, and Westphalian ham are considered among the finest foods in the world, and none of them use refrigeration during the curing and aging process. The key words are when done correctly. Follow established recipes. Use proper salt ratios. Maintain correct temperatures. Pay attention to what your meat looks and smells like, and you will produce safe, delicious, shelf-stable food that would have made your grandmother proud. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about which one of these methods speaks to you most. Maybe you've got access to a lot of pork, and the idea of making your own salt pork or cured bacon from scratch sounds like exactly the kind of practical homestead skill you've been wanting to learn. Maybe you've got a smoker already, and you want to learn cold smoking to take your preservation knowledge to the next level. Maybe you're a hunter, and you've got venison in the freezer, and you want to learn how to cure it into a shelf-stable product that you can throw in your pack on a hunting trip without worrying about it spoiling. All of these are real, achievable skills. None of them require expensive equipment. None of them require a chemistry degree. All of them connect you to a lineage of food wisdom that stretches back further than any nation on earth. The Amish didn't invent salt curing or smoking. They inherited it from their European ancestors, who inherited it from people who were doing it thousands of years before Christ. This knowledge has survived because it works, because it feeds people, because it is genuinely, demonstrably effective. My grandmother, Mama Dottie, used to say that a full smokehouse and a full cellar were worth more than money in the bank. Because money can lose its value, but good cured meat is always worth what it's worth. I believe she was right. And in a world where supply chains can be disrupted, where power grids can fail, where grocery store shelves can go bare in the span of a weekend, having this knowledge, having these skills, is a form of real security that nobody can take away from you. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Every week on this channel, I bring you practical, old-fashioned food skills that actually work in the real world. Next week, we're going to be talking about fat rendering, specifically how to render and store lard the traditional way, and why lard is one of the most underrated preservation mediums in any traditional kitchen. You do not want to miss it. And right now, in the comments below, I want you to tell me which of these preservation methods you're most interested in trying first. Salt curing, cold smoking, fermented sausage, or are you a complete beginner and you want me to start even more basic? Maybe a series on building your first curing setup from scratch for under $20. Tell me where you're at and I'll meet you there. This is Sue Ellen. Thank you for being here. Now go put that knowledge to work.